Welcome to this start and mid-career hurdle events. I'm Laura Cancella from the Italian Institute of Technology and the Edurbeto Teleton Institute. And today I'm going to chair this event under the umbrella of the FENS Committee for Higher Education and Training and as a representative of the FENS Kavli Network of Excellence. Now, even if today you will only see my face, this event was organized together with two other scholars of the FENS Kavli Network of Excellence, Pirta and Ileana. So please consider them as co-chairing this session with me. So this event was designed after the large success of the Start Your Lab event at the FENS meeting 2 years ago in Berlin. There we only had talks though about early years of a PI career. I guess that was because the FENS Kavli Network of Excellence was very young, and many of us, although already very aware that when you start your lab, you don't need to just jump one hurdle, but a number of them, and sometimes even using some unconventional and creative ways. We all hope that at the end of the first rush, you would get in a place like this. Now, a few years has come by, and we now know that although the first years may be even very successful, at the end of the first rush, you will very likely face what we now like to call the mid-career gap. So this year, we put together all the alumni, mid and new generation of FENS Kavli Network of Excellence scholars. And the teams will include how to get your first PI position, how to get funded and build a team, choose research project, survive to the mid-career gap, mobility for early and mid-career, stress and work-life balance at all career stages. Speaker will be Carlos, Pavan, Jami, Manuel, Gaia, and Julie. At the end of the presentation, there will be a Q&A session, so please do not be shy and ask anything you may like. So now just enjoy the talks and we will see you later. Bye.
Hello, my name is Carlos Ribeiro. I'm a PI at the Champenois Foundation in Lisbon, and I'm the chair of the FENS Kavli Network of Excellence alumni organization. And today I would like to talk to you about a piece which I wrote with Tora Karadottir, Johannes Letzkus, and Manuel Mamelli when we were scholars in the FENS Kavli Network of Excellence about how to get your first PI position. This has been published in EGN, and I strongly encourage you to read the full article. Joel has much more details than what I'm going to tell you now. And I would also like to thank the whole network. This is really a fantastic group of friends and scholars from whom I learned so much. Also, let me start by having a disclosure here, right? So we try to distill general themes, but obviously the scientific universe in Europe and the whole world is very different and very diverse. So you will have to then tailor your application and your strategy to the specific country and institution you're applying to. The first question you should ask yourself is, do I want to be a PI? And why do I want to be a PI? Sometimes being a PI can be daunting. It's like being a sailor in the middle of a stormy sea and only having your desk and your computer actually to allow you to survive through it. But being a PI is also wonderful. Right? You get to work with amazing people, build up an ecosystem in your team of people who will expand your horizon beyond what you could ever do alone. And also, you will get to really see people do well, develop, and thrive in their career. Being a PI means to really be able to be part of a network, building up a network, influencing the network, the same way a neuron is in a network. You need to build up people, a network of people who support you, who advise you, who mentor you, but also you will need to learn how to manage a network, how to manage people, how to work with them, and allow them to get the best out of themselves so that they can do the best possible science. So the presentation has 3 parts: getting prepared for going for PI positions, the actual application procedure itself, and then the negotiations afterwards. The thing which is the most important, what you really need, is a scientific vision. What is a scientific problem you're going to be tackling? And this has to go beyond a specific project, a specific idea you have, like you have now in your postdoc. And also, it should not be necessarily what your PI at the moment is working. This vision doesn't come out of heaven like here in Blues Brothers, but it's something which matures and develops with time, something which comes from interacting with people at conferences like the FENS Forum, with your friends, sometimes also your family, right? At the dinner table where you're trying to pitch them a cool idea. You need to publish, right? You need to show that you have taken an idea and produced knowledge and shared that with the community. Papers are the proof for that. Right? And I would advise you to also get management experience, right? Get your hands already experienced with grant writing, apply for fellowships, maybe review with your mentor, right? Get involved in committees, learn to mentor and supervise people. Right? But when are you ready to apply? Well, you should have a big paper, have a strong network, an amazing idea. Everything has to be ready so you can go. No, that's definitely not the way to go. Don't wait for the ideal position to open. Don't wait for everything to fit. From beginning on as a postdoc, think about where you're going to be, where you would like to work. Also, you don't have to wait that the professorship opens. Often you can apply for grants, which will fund then the opening of a position for you. And multiple countries in Europe have these great opportunities, like in Switzerland, the Nationalfondsprofessur, or the Welcome, or the ERC. Then, obviously, the application is very important. The cover letter, which sells, which shows people why you're going to be fitting and why you're going to make a difference, right? You need to explain what your scientific achievements are. This is more than just the impact factor of the journals which you published in. And also you need to show what your vision is. Some people do that already in form of a kind of a mini grant, preview with aims, etc. You don't need to do that, but that shows, for example, that you already thought about how to get funding. So now you got the invitation for the job interview. Congratulations. So now you need to prepare. Find out where you're going to be interviewing, who is on the committee, with whom you're going to be talking, what do they work on. You need to practice your talk, and you need to practice the talk even more, and practice the talk again more, and practice a chalk talk, and the panel interviews, and everything which comes with this. And then you practice even more. Practice all the interactions, the Q&As, etc. The better prepared you are, the better you're going to be doing. But don't forget that there's also a social component to the interview, right? The faculty there is going to be choosing their colleague for the next 10 years. So the social meetings, the arrival, your interaction with the administrative staff, the dinners, the departure, all of this is part of the interview. Keep that in mind. So prepare beyond the talk and the chalk talk. But also don't forget, you're choosing to. You have to ask yourself, do I want to spend the next 10 years with these people? Is this an environment which supports me, which supports young people? Are there mentors? You will need a lot of support. Are there people who will support you, right? And also, is this the city and the country I want to live in? Maybe where I want to have a family or live with my partner, right, for the next 10 years. But really, at the end, enjoy. You're going to get to interact with amazing people, hear about a lot of great science. You need to be flexible, right? The thing is not going to go exactly as planned, but you know, you're going to wing it. And then don't get drunk at dinner. I think that's always a good advice. So now, congratulations, you got the job offer. What now? You're going to take it immediately? No, wait a second. You need to think carefully about this. You need to think where you're going to be spending the next 10 years of your life. Sometimes prestigious places look very tempting, but new opportunities, thinking out of the box is important. For example, this here is the picture of the place where now the Champalimaud Center for the Unknown stands when I applied, where nothing existed yet. And now I can work in an amazing environment with fantastic colleagues which inspire me every day. And this was something which was not so obvious 10 years ago when the first people applied there. Also, you need to negotiate. I know as scientists, you're not used to ask for things, but you're not asking for yourself. You're asking for your future mentees. You're asking for your students and postdocs so they can do the best possible science in your environment. You also want to find out, what does the institution want from me, right? Do they want me only to write papers, Or do they also want me to teach? Do I want to do that? Can they give me all the technical and infrastructural support, the funding opportunities I will need? And so you need to talk to people, find out what their packages were inside of the institution, but also outside. Compare, and maybe even have multiple offers which you can pitch against each other. But most important, find out where the people are going to come, which you're going to recruit in the lab. How good are the students? From where can you get students? Because these, at the end, are the ones which are going to make a difference in your science. I made it sound like there's a clear path forward, only one way to get there, but that's not true. We all have our own path. We all have our own way of negotiating these things and finding what makes us happy and where we're going to end up in science. Sometimes it's foggy, but you can and should find your own way. And most importantly, you might be thinking, this is nothing for me. I don't see myself doing science. I mean, if I look at these type of people, they don't look like me. Well, you should apply. Because one big problem in science is that we don't have the full spectrum of opportunities and also of insights and perspectives which society can offer us. So you should apply, even if you think that at the end of the day, you don't fit the stereotype of the scientist which you always see in all the media, because you can bring the next breakthrough. You have a unique opportunity and a unique perspective, and you can make a difference doing science with other people. And it's a lot of fun. Thank you.
My name is Pavan Ramdia, and I'm reaching you from the EPFL in Lausanne, Switzerland, in the BrainMind Institute and the Institute for Bioengineering. Today, I'll be telling you about how to get started by funding and building a team when you start your first lab. I should preface this by first stating that the resources that I'm going to be talking about, or the ideas I've been talking about in the next slides, are actually all taken from available resources shown here in this slide. So if you want to screenshot this, it can provide you with a lot more in-depth information about lab management, grant writing, fellowships, and interviews. So just to give you a little bit of background, in my laboratory, I've had for about 3 years now at the EPFL, and I've had several early career grants, and I've grown a team of about 12 scientists up till now. So what I tell you is going to be colored by my own experiences. These experiences can differ across countries and certainly for individual people. So I encourage you to seek out other resources and ideas when thinking about your own career grants and developing your own team. That said, I think there are a few experiences that allow me to inform other people's future goals, starting a laboratory at the level of obtaining grants and growing a strong team. Today, I'll start by talking about getting funded. So the first thing to mention is that for new laboratories and new PIs, there are opportunities that are not available for mid-career PIs and late career PIs, and these are called early career grants. So early career grants are large amounts of money that are set aside for new investigators. And I think the advice that I would give primarily for these career grants begin with that of just going for it. So many people don't really feel ready to apply for these prestigious grants, but I think without trying, of course, you certainly will not succeed. It should be mentioned as well that expectations for these early career researchers are lower than they would be for mid or late career researchers. So your postdoc publication may be sufficient to qualify you for these kinds of grants. For some of the mid-career grants, such as the ERC Consolidator, for example, it may also be interesting to have your own publications by the time you apply. So be aware of that if you're not eligible for the starting grant, for example, that you would want to try to potentially invest in getting that first publication before applying for a Consolidator grant. So there are different kinds of early career grants, starting with the global ones, such as the ERC and the HFSP. There are also, of course, country-specific grants, which I show here for Switzerland and for the UK, and as well, there are collaborative early career grants from the HFSP. When you're writing your first career grants, it's important to make sure that you leverage your strengths so that you come with on a strong footing from your postdoctoral work, have some kind of track record in the area. And I think the most important thing is to be very clear and exciting with the work that you're proposing. So when you write this grant, you want to make sure you don't have a block of text, but rather you have some visual aids, for example. Make sure you start thinking about this early, even potentially before you start your laboratory. And try to make sure as well that you get opinions and editing from your colleagues as you start writing this grant. If you're successful with the written portion of the grant, you may be invited for an interview. And again, the advice is to try to make sure that you maintain a very clear point about what you're trying to overcome with your research, what kind of challenges you're overcoming. And remember that you only have a few minutes to really convince a large panel, a diverse panel of scientists that what you're proposing is really worthwhile. And again, one of the best things one can do to prepare for this is to practice in front of your colleagues and to make sure you take their suggestions very seriously. So these large career grants are quite competitive. Of course, if you don't manage to get one of these career grants, the ideas that come out of writing a grant can be quite beneficial for other kinds of grants. For example, I think it's quite useful to write individual fellowships for your individual team members. This allows you to also increase the prestige for your own students and postdocs and their CVs. It allows you to concretely define what research projects they're going to be performing in your laboratory. And of course, that emphasizes the importance of hiring the best people you can to become competitive for these individual grants. Another option is actually to write collaborative grants. So with, for example, your new colleagues at your new institution, you might be able to explore new interdisciplinary interfaces with them. Your senior colleagues can actually address one of the major concerns about young investigators having a minimal track record. And it also helps to recruit to your small new laboratory when you are associated with some more well-known established PIs. So having obtained funding, the next challenge is to build a strong team. And so I'll be talking about what you look for in your team members, how to assess the applicants, and other routes for hiring. So what do you look for in your team members? For me, I look for 3 different kinds of diversity. So the first one is diversity of expertise. So you obviously have your own strengths, and you can hire, for example, PhD students to work in your domain of research, and these are rather easier to train, but you also want to complement those weaknesses that you haven't quite built up yet. So for example, recruiting students or postdocs with expertise outside of your domain. And you can therefore kind of leverage this diversity of expertise to build these research programs at the interface of multiple disciplines. You also want to have, of course, diversity of experiences and therefore diversity of cultures and sexes. What I believe is it's important to do this to broaden the kind of perspectives and ideas that you have in your laboratory and to try to really contribute to having a more inclusive scientific environment. Third, I'd say you want to have a diversity of seniority. So you want to have some PhD students and postdocs, but I think I would emphasize first and foremost not to sacrifice quality in the name of, for example, having more postdocs. The next thing to do, of course, once you have a goal is to assess applicants. So of course, one of the things you'll be getting is a lot of very positive letters of recommendation. So make sure you contact the reference letter writers for more details, either by the phone or simply by email for more informal correspondence. And of course, the next most important thing is to try to interview these applicants in person, because you'll often get special information over dinner or from your team members about these future potential lab members that you wouldn't get simply by email or even phone or Skype conversations. You can even invite your senior colleagues to assess applicants in their talks. There are other routes for hiring which are less dramatic than identifying somebody and interviewing them. These include short experiences like having master's students or interns in your laboratory for a few months. And these are quite similar to the rotations that students perform in the USA. Alternatively, you can also have co-supervised students or postdocs, which you can actually learn more from your colleagues by trying to co-supervise in terms of how they run laboratories, how they train students and postdocs. It also allows you to really draw on the expertise of your collaborators for future research projects, which can be very exciting. So that's a short overview of how to get funded and how to start building your team. Again, I'll point you to a number of resources that you might want to pursue if you're interested in one of these topics. In particular, I really appreciated my experience at the EMBO Lab Management course that really allowed you to dive into some of the issues of starting a new laboratory. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Hi, my name is Jaime de la Rocha, and I work at EDBUBS in Barcelona. So starting a lab can be an incredible amount of work, and it's for that reason that it can be also a very stressful experience. Because of this, it is very important that you set your expectations right. You set your expectations right about the time this is going to take. The time it's going to take to get your first data set. The time it's going to take to train your first student. The time it's going to take to publish your first paper. Also about the impact your first paper or your first work will have. I don't think there is any need in starting like high profile, big impact or anything like that. I would advise you to start small and grow from there. That said, starting your lab only happens basically once in a lifetime. So I would also advise you to try to reflect on the moment and try to enjoy it. For a few years, you will have this grace period in which most people are not expecting that you're going to publish a lot of papers. Because the decisions you will take at that point will have long-lasting consequences, I would advise you to pause and think a little bit about where you want to go, where you want to see yourself and your team in 5-10 years. Be forgiving with yourself. Nobody was born knowing how to be a PI. Nobody taught us how to do it. So we learn by reproducing the patterns we've seen, we've experienced and worked for us, and also by trial and error. So you will make errors, you will make mistakes, and you will learn from them. Be forgiving. Also value the achievements your lab and your team are doing. And don't be always complaining about that, yeah, but you know, it's just going too slow. Because we're all going too slow. And most of the times, that's okay. So when I was going to start my lab, a friend of mine told me, you will feel the solitude of the marathon runner. La soledad del corredor de fondo. You will feel lonely, but that's the life of a PI. But you can mitigate this to some extent by building a strong team of collaborators. As a young PI, you will be expected to show leadership and independence. But sometimes we confuse this by having to prove everyone that we can do everything on our own. And we all know that research is a team effort. So as a PI, you will have to identify, establish, and organize fruitful and long-lasting collaborations, something which is not always so easy. However, when collaborations work, I can tell you it's so much more fun than working alone. So my advice is to show people around you that you're a versatile team player. And I think this will facilitate enormously your initial steps as a PI.
Hello everyone, my name is Manuel Mameli from the Department of Neuroscience at the University of Lausanne. So first of all, I would like to thank FENS, and especially a big thank goes to Laura and Pirta for organizing and putting together this workshop and providing me the opportunity to contribute to it. So today the idea is to discuss the following topic: how to survive the mid-career gap. And during this time, I'm going to try to give you my opinion, my experience, and mix it with the one of some friends and colleagues at the same stage of career that helped me out to put together some of the concepts I'm going to discuss, and in order to provide food for the discussion later on. Now, to start, let's define what is a mid-career PI. As much it happens when we try to give some properties to wine, we know that we look at them in terms of tannin content, in terms of their sapidity or aroma persistence. The same happens for a mid-career PI. It has certain properties, and although it may not apply to everyone, generally speaking, a mid-career PI is an academic researcher that is shifted or is shifting from an assistant to associate position, that is in the process or just received a tenure position. And importantly, they demonstrated successful international fundraising, as well as successful publication over the last 3-5 years. And last but not least, is an academic researcher that demonstrated successful training of collaborators, including PhD students and postdocs, for example. Now, in many systems in our institution, the shifting from a junior PI to a mid-career PI becomes a stressful and energy-demanding challenge, almost a fight against a dark entity. Why? Because we don't know the requirement, simply. Often mobilities require, therefore demanding very strong commitment from lab members or the families. Often the uncertainty emerging from institution in renewing the position becomes a mentally and physically frustrating experience, requiring a very, very strong proactivity in order to make alternative plans. Often, the evaluation from the institution or a new recruitment becomes the new challenge to face within these new transition steps. So therefore, as much as is true for the moment we go for a junior PI process, also the mid-career shift requires thought and preparation in advance. Now, all of this preparation, however, different from the junior PI, goes along with new demands for the not anymore junior PI. And indeed, a mid-career PI also face increase in the institutional duties, including teaching or responsibilities at the local level. It has been asked to commit to activity dedicated to the community, like grant panels, board selections, outreach, or international schools, that has faced an increased traveling schedule or feel the pressure for consolidating or shifting a research line, receives higher demand for scientific review activities, and on top of it, leads and manages probably a larger group of collaborators than in the beginning. And altogether, that goes along with the dealing with the constant, complex, busy, exciting personal life, family, kids, and so on. So I will try to be provocative here, because this seems to be everything sort of dark, difficult, complicated. But what if I say, is this really a burden? Or this is actually, in part, what we as scientists, we look over our career. We do know very well, all of us, that facing the different steps of career, it will be complicated. Maybe we are going to face moments in which we see that is not fair, and it will not be the same for everyone. So there is not a pure or a single recipe for each one of us. And we are aware that there are rewarding moments that are worth the price that we pay at every step or at every shift in our career. So I think that in the end, instead of being the dark side of mid-career PI, some of these large amount of responsibilities and tasks are actually part of the excitement of our life. It is maybe not correct to build rules and recipes, but I think that over each step is rather important to observe and base ourselves on experience of others and on ourselves, our own experience. And then we have to build and adjust the priorities as long as we go into the different steps. I think we need to have different values and adapt these values over the different steps, especially during this stage of PI versus towards mid-career. And we have to stay balanced in order to cope with the pressure, but not to end up into burnout, which is sometimes a very important issue at this level. And to do so, we need to keep up with a certain internal personal enthusiasm to face the good surprise and fight the disappointment, and therefore keep going on this roller coaster. Now, these are my thoughts on what are the burden and hurdles in shifting from junior PI to mid-career PI. But as I said, all these thoughts and experience were, of course, shaped throughout my career and shaped by many. And some of the leading figures that shaped these steps are indeed the people in the lab, but as well as the mentorship that has received and friendship and collegiality of colleagues and, of course, families. So I'll thank everyone for staying tuned, and I look forward for the discussion at the end of the presentations. Thank you very much.
So hello, everyone. So today I'm going to talk about mobility in science. Actually, I was kind of assigned to talk about that. And so at the very beginning, I had just to ask myself, what is mobility, right? So what I'm going to talk about it exactly. And so to help me, I just went back and looked at the definition of mobility, which is the ability to move or be moved freely and easily. Now, obviously, when I was thinking about this topic, immediately came to my mind three ways in which I could see mobility. One is the capability or the possibility to move around the world. The other is to move across disciplines. And the third one is to move between career paths, so industry versus academia. So what I'm going to do in the talk is actually going through the three of them, and then give you a brief kind of overview about my experience in the three different areas. And I don't know, I don't think I am in the position to make any suggestion, but at least to give some opinion about that. And I hope that then later on we should have the panel, I think, and then discuss about that. So moving around the world. So I think I had quite an experience with that. So I'm a native Italian, and so the first movement that I did was to go from Rome to Nashville, Tennessee, when I was still quite young, so just about to finish the university. I was at Vanderbilt University for about a year, and then I went back to Rome. But then I immediately recognized, and this is actually something that probably is an effect of mobility and going around the world, that you kind of, maybe you get even a bit addicted about that, because it's very fascinating. So after I went back to Rome, I recognized that I needed and I wanted to do more experience. So I moved, when I started my PhD, to Berlin. So actually the lab at that point was in Hamburg, and then I moved to Berlin. There I did a PhD postdoc, let's say, and then from Berlin, I moved to San Diego for my postdoc, and from San Diego, I moved back to Europe, to Vienna. Now, this was, it was not really alone. So as you can see here, a baby popped up because in fact, I had a child here in Berlin and one kind of in between Berlin and San Diego. So when I was moving from one to the other place. So I wasn't alone, but yet that was all possible. So what did I learn, and do I suggest to move around as I did? So, so first of all, what did I learn? So I met a lot of very nice people, including actually my husband. I learned several languages. I didn't mention, I even did a stop in Spain, so I could learn Spanish, English a bit, and German, and obviously forget Italian eventually. But I was exposed to many different cultures, and that's what I mean. Is definitely is the most important thing. And here in culture, I mean non-scientific, but also scientific cultures. And it's amazing how different it can be to be science in different places. So you really get to be exposed to a different way of thinking, different way of working. But above all, what I really think that gave me the possibility to do is to follow my passion. So, and this goes to whether I would suggest or not to move. I mean, this is a very personal choice, right? And I think there should be, as usual, there should never be a rule like you have to move to be able to then do academic career. However, I have to say that, so what is really important, I think, is that you are not limited by the fact, or eventually that you feel not limited by the fact of moving if you want really to follow your passion. So if the lab that does the stuff that of your dreams are, it's somewhere else, we should still be able to go. Obviously, this comes with some issues as well. Moving that much meant that eventually I wasn't able to see as frequently my family as I would have been if I would have stayed in Italy, and also with friends. So every time you have to start new. But to me, the plus are actually more than the cons. So as a PI, so looking at the mobility with a PI eye, I would say, I mean, for me, it's extremely important. And so any new PI here, I would really recommend to have as much diversity in the lab as possible. So so my lab at the moment, I have pretty much people from several different places in Europe. So Austrian, Italians, but also actually from other, so non-European, so Egypt, for instance, but I had people from the US and so on and so forth. So I think that I have people from Portugal. So it's really, this gives really, enrich the lab really immensely and really bring a lot of different culture together. And as we know, diversity is important, not for us just as a people, as a person, but really because there have been several studies that show that diversity really at all levels enrich and lift up science. So yeah. So just also when I was looking at that, I was and mobility in general, I was doing a little research and I found this nice paper. It's from 2012. So actually, probably several things have been changed since then, and I should have we should find a more recent data as well. But actually, it says that pretty much there are certain countries that seems to move around more. So it seems that Germans are actually moving a lot around. And so there's some countries are moving more than others, or some people from some countries moving more than others. And also what we see is that the majority of the people, a lot of people are really going to the US. So again, this was 2012, so maybe that changed, and now maybe it will change even more in case Trump would win in November again. But so as a European, so this is a European Neuroscience Society meeting. So I think that what we are learning is that we should try to bring as many people to Europe from different cultures, including from the US, but also from many other countries. So that we should try to make this trend a bit different. And then this is also very visible by the fact that in general, mostly are postdocs that are moving around, students and postdocs. But actually, when it's coming to professors, it seems that the majority of the professors in a country is indeed, are indeed from the same country. And this is something that here I could bring as an experience as an institute. I am at the IST Austria, so the Institute of Science and Technology, Austria. And here we are really making a huge effort to try to bring people from all countries. And we are very proud about having people from Japan to US. So we have several American professors at the moment, but from many other countries as well. So we are really proud of that, but we are also putting a lot of effort. And again, the idea is that increasing diversity, it really brings a lot to the science we are doing here. So the bottom line here should be is obviously it's a very personal choice. But moving around is very good for both the person that is moving, that can learn many new things, but also from the receiving institutes or labs. It is a very important thing. So the other move that one can make is actually move across disciplines. So I personally, I started as an electrophysiologist, so I was studying ion channels, so the very beginning, chloride channels. Then I moved, following still looking at with the eye on channels and transporters, I moved to another lab where I did mostly molecular and biology and mouse work. And finally, I mean, for my postdoctoral studies in the US, I was learning a lot of human genetics. And overall, what I did is actually my laboratory at the moment is using all of these under the umbrella of neuroscience and neurological disorders. And so my lab is kind of broad within the neurosciences and in terms of the type of technologies we are using. And again, I found this, for me, was a very fascinating process, which, however, kind of meant to be always a bit open to different way of thinking. Which obviously, and again, I mean, here I'm talking about moving between the life sciences. I'm not even talking about moving, for instance, from life science to physics or chemistry and so on. But in general, this requires to really stay to be open-minded, and also so this is something that we should really try to do more and more. And also meant two things. So first, that there were always periods that I felt uncomfortable, for instance, going to meetings where I would not know anyone, because was not the area that I was used to be in. And so no one eventually would know the PI that I was working with before, or no one would know me there. But again, it was really an interesting process, because it kind of increased the type of interactions and the amount of interaction that I had. Obviously, as a young PI, I had to kind of choose whether to go even farther into that and still branch more out, or get more specialized. And I think this is always a difficult choice, and depends really on the career stage eventually, in my opinion. So people that come in my lab always say, look, you are not going to get specialized in one particular technique or one specific experimental paradigm, but rather we are looking at a complex problem with a number of different and diverse number of technologies. And but again, this is a a kind of difficult choice, because maybe when one starts as a new PI, wants to remain focused on the main question, and then leave out the branching out for later. So that's at least what I did. As soon as I get tenure, then I was kind of starting to get a bit out of my comfort zone more. So obviously, interdisciplinarity and move from one field to another also takes time. So we have really to accept that. And this is actually very visible also in terms of the number of citations that interdisciplinary papers have. So it seems that in the short time, the number of publications that interdisciplinary publication receive, so here are the more interdisciplinary, is less versus the one that are less interdisciplinary. But on the long run, it seems that having do more interdisciplinary work pay off, and so just be patient, and that's also what I really learned with my career. So just be patient. Eventually, this will come up. And the last thing I want to talk about in the context of mobility is academia versus industry. And so the question is always, should I do academia or industry, follow academic or industry path, that's always what happens. Or here I say, or both. And this, again, here I kind of can provide my experience. So I wasn't thinking at all about industry and the startups and this all new world till a few years ago, till I started talking with a few people that actually are instead in the business, in industry business. And that was quite interesting, and in a way it ended up that I'm currently kind of supposed to make two companies. So I have two companies in the make, and this was a fun process. Again, it is really out of my comfort zone. So I had to learn all new terminology, all new problems. Yesterday I was doing a short talk or interview, and one person asked, "What are your UPS?" And I was for a moment, so UPS is unique selling points, which we're not using often in academia, so again, it was a very enriching experience, and so the way I really went there, again, I mean, those are just small startups, but the way I went into that, it was really because I was talking with people that came from other fields, and I was interacting with them, and kind of the ideas that popped up. So I think the bottom line of the entire talk is, in general, that diversity is important, and so diversity across anything, diversity in terms of cultures, but then also that is nice to talk with people that have different type of experience. I mean, talk with people always, right? That's always boosts interdisciplinarity, but also the possibility to move from industry to academia. And talking with people, we are learning a lot. Explore new possibilities, remain flexible and open-minded. But I think above all, what really, to me, is the bottom line is that we should remain flexible to follow our passions, and that's to me is the key for success, if you want. So I hope that was somehow interesting, but I hope we will have some discussion later, and thank you for being here.
Hello everyone, I'm Julie Duquet and I work at the University of Louvain in Belgium. As my colleagues just emphasized, we get a lot of gratification from doing our work, but the job can also be very stressful. We have to deal with experiments that fail, papers that get bad reviews, and projects that don't get funded. Even at an early career stage, Many PhD students report being under high pressure. They feel they need to work day and night on their research project. Postdocs also have their share of stress. It's really hard to get a position in such a competitive environment. And then when all goes well and you finally start your own lab, you freak out because you realize you have a completely new job, one you were not trained for. You don't know how to manage a group, you have to learn to teach and to be equally productive there, and often you also have new service obligations for the institution and the scientific community. So the workload is huge, with the need to be multitasked, to take on responsibilities, and to manage people. Most of us are not prepared for that when starting as a young PI. So the goal of my presentation is to give you some tips based on what I learned to minimize stress and maximize productivity. The first thing I want to point out is the importance of developing time management skills. A successful jump from postdoc to lab head really requires a tight control over time and tasks. Personally, I always keep a to-do list up to date. And I also like to start the week by organizing my tasks over the weekdays. It's really reassuring when you see that everything fits in your calendar. When doing so, of course, you need to make sure that you structure the day so that hard, critical thinking tasks happen during the hours of peak productivity, and then easier work is done when your focus typically declines. Once you've done that, you can just consider the tasks one day at a time. But of course, first you need to identify your missions. You cannot just take on all tasks that come your way. You need to prioritize them and only commit to those that are important to you, tasks that are worth your time and from which you will somehow benefit. For the rest, you really need to delegate and to learn to say no, which is not an easy thing, especially as a young PI, because you feel so grateful for the position that you may also feel that you need to say yes to everything. But that's not possible, and it's really crucial to learn to say no. It's crucial if you want to survive. Once the tasks are identified, focus first on the urgent ones and plan the rest for later. When doing so, make sure that you will have enough time to meet your deadlines. Trust me, if you succeed in doing this, you will be very productive and you will have more time for life outside the lab, which takes me to my second tip. It's really important to have a healthy work-life balance. We need to resist the pressure to sacrifice our life and put aside other interests for the sake of the next experiment, the next conference talk, the next paper. We really need to save time for our friends and family and make sure we have a life we enjoy outside the lab. This is crucial because private life is what helps you overcome your bad moments at work. It's really important. It's for our mental health and a way to avoid burnout. In line with this, it's also a good thing to keep or to develop a hobby. A hobby gives a sense of success and confidence that's not directly tied to work. Many scientists say that their pastimes make them better researchers by sharpening their mind, boosting their creativity, building cognitive flexibility, and of course, reducing stress. I really think that as a PI and mentor, it's our responsibility to make sure that our team members know that they have to take care of themselves and devote enough time to their private life. A little stress is not bad, but we need to make sure they don't get stressed out. Personally, after periods of hard work, I ask my students and postdocs to rest and take vacations. I also find it useful to organize events outside the lab, parties and team buildings. It promotes a positive work atmosphere and strengthens the ties between the lab members. It's also good to reward excellent work by offering extra conferences or other benefits. a singularity of our job is that we are the ones setting the goals. And that's really nice. But then it's also difficult to know when we have enough grant money, enough publications, enough students. And in fact, often pressures don't come from chasing funding or tenure, but from chasing an ideal of what makes a good scientist. So I'd like to finish with the last recommendation. Make sure you set your expectations at a level that's right for you. And be honest about that. If you succeed in doing that and in having a healthy work-life balance, you'll have a lot of fun in this great job.
So we are here with all the speakers and we will be happy to answer to your questions. Together with us is also Pirta Otulainen, who I told you already co-organized this session with me. So I would say hi, Pirta, and hi to all the speakers. And we can start with the questions. We have many. So let's start with this one. In my postdoc, I started with different projects from scratch, and this has caused a publication gap, after which I expect several papers to come more or less simultaneously. If and how does this affect getting a PI position? I would say this is for Carlos.
Thanks, Laura. Well, I think that's actually very typical in terms of a CV of a postdoc, because actually one thing you're supposed, or one thing you can do as a postdoc is to immerse yourself in a new environment, learn new things and so on. So no one expects you to be productive from the first day on, right? And as long as you can, when you write your application, right, you can point to published papers, or nowadays actually very common is also to point to preprints, right, on bioRxiv, for example. I think you're in good shape. So there's no worry about a possible gap during your first years of postdoc, because that's what you're supposed to do, to train yourself in a new thing and explore new avenues. So that should be not a worry.
I can take here when you are starting a group, you need to select the good people. And here's the question: when selecting first people for your lab, when you have limited funding, how not to make a mistake? And this is, of course, very obvious. What are your strategies how to find just good people? Who wants to start?
Well, I guess since I talked about hiring, I guess I could start off that one. Obviously, a very important question. I think before answering it, it's clear that even senior PIs don't know precisely how to find the right people for their laboratories. So this is not something that has a very clear answer, but I would recommend trying to do your due diligence as much as possible, as I mentioned in the video, to try to make sure you interview in person, have many eyes on the candidate, and really to ask yourself, is this the kind of person that fits the characteristic of my laboratory, that has a certain personality that fits with my laboratory? But beyond that, it's quite challenging. Maybe someone else has a suggestion as well.
You, Manuel, can continue.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what Pavan said. Maybe to add up on it, I would add, of course, the interview is very important, but also to feel this as something clicked between you as a PI and the person that you are hiring bidirectionally, such that you can feel that indeed there is a very strong ground to work, in order not to, from the two parts, never regret anything afterwards.
And let's take Gaia also. Gaia was saying.
Well, I was just saying that doing mistakes, you will do mistakes, and to accept that, because you will learn from that. So you're not perfect, and we all did mistakes at the very beginning. And of course, we are trying to give hints about how to reduce this, but you will still do them. And that's actually part of the process. Accept that.
I can say from my side that I normally try to have trainees so that they are 3 months before I select them. But still, I would say that after 1 year, you know if your selection was good one or bad one, and then it's somehow late. Carlos, maybe some words and then we go on.
Yeah, so I mean, I also want to say maybe you also have to rethink, right, what is the perfect candidate, right? Because often, I mean, one of the great things about working with people is that they're going to surprise you and they're going to bring things in which you normally wouldn't do. So maybe also being flexible and seeing the opportunity someone brings into your lab, and not does that person exactly fit with a predefined idea, is a big strength when hiring people. Because in my opinion, one thing I try to do in the lab is to build an ecosystem of people who will work with me, and not to just find clones of me which will just add hands to my ideas.
Let me just add one more thing is learn and be aware about our biases, choosing people, particularly gender biases and other kind of biases we all have very hardwired. And there are ways to really learn about how we perceive people in a biased way. And I think it's really helpful to just go through this process before you select people. That's very important.
Okay, so we have another one here. How easy is to go for a postdoc or a PI elsewhere when you have a family somewhere else? So this is, I guess, both for Julie and Gaia, because it's both mobility and family stress. So who wants to start?
So I don't see the question exactly, but I guess, so the question is how difficult or how easy it is. I mean, I think it's not really a question of being difficult. It's a question of making compromises. And especially if you have a family, you need to make sure that that everybody's going to be happy in the place. But I don't see the question quite well. So of course, if you are just by yourself, it's easier than if you have a family. And if you have a family, I think you just need to discuss and make compromises.
Yes, no, the point is when you have your family somewhere and then you're moving somewhere else. Yes. So it's about mobility as well.
Yeah, so I will let Gaia answer then for the mobility aspect.
Yes, I mean, it's obviously it's very subjective. That's what I try to address also in my presentation, right? It's not a must, and if you want to make it happen, you make it happen. So it's not easy. You know, myself, again, I was living in Vienna with 2 kids, and my husband was in San Diego for about 2 years, and that was not easy. But still we survived, and actually we not just survived, we went through that. So there were also positive sides, I don't know. but you know, I mean, it's not easy, but I think it depends on really what you want, and then you can make it happen, as everything, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it's about compromise and make it happen. The two things at the same time.
Okay.
Maybe if I can add one thing on this, maybe you should also learn and be okay with yourself in saying, no, I don't want to do it. I don't feel like, and I'm not gonna stick with this because of the pressure. There could be a plan that would better fit your needs.
That's perfect advice also.
Okay, then let's go on, and we have again for the starting a lab, and here the question is just to have an idea how many applications options the early PI position do you recommend it's better starting, like how many positions you should apply when you start looking for the PI position?
I think it's for Carlos, right?
Carlos.
I think that the most important thing is to really think hard where you would like to work, right? I don't think that it's worth applying to positions where from the beginning on you don't see yourself and also your partners and your family working with, right? So focusing is something which can help, because then also you can reach out there before, see what are options, etc. Obviously, I mean, as everything, right, in science and in your career, luck plays a big role. So definitely numbers will also help. But really, I think a healthy mix between where is it realistically you would like to work, so that you can focus your attention to that, tailor your application to that. But then also making sure that you don't put all your eggs into one basket is a good strategy to go, right? So if you apply, because everybody will put a lot of energy into it, if you get into the interview stage, you should really be interested in that position.
If I could just add something to this.
Yes.
So I think there's actually a very positive side to applying broadly also, because you actually meet many scientists that you'll eventually become colleagues with, regardless of what happens in your selection of university. So it's quite beneficial in other ways.
I think it depends also how limited you are,
Yes.
where you can go. If you can globally everywhere, you can really search for the places which are in your ambitious for the science. Otherwise, if you want to go your homeland, the positions are very limited.
Yeah, it's also true that when you apply in many places, you should be open really to meet everybody in the department, and then you'll make friends and collaboration. It did happen to me that then I published papers with people that were in institute where I did not go. So I have here another question. I guess it's for everybody, and it's very hard. So the question reads, which mistakes have you observed that crushed the lab? Who wants to start? Hani, you had this very interesting talk, very emotional and passionate.
I made lots of mistakes. I would say don't look very unhappy. I think the way you feel is just creates, it has a huge impact on the atmosphere you're creating around you. So it's very hard. Sometimes you're very stressed and sometimes you're unhappy. But I would say if you're unhappy, try to hide it and try to show your passion, try to show when things go right that you're happy, because every little comment, every face you put, every day you just, that has an impact on the people working around you to an extent that you sometimes cannot really measure. So try to be positive and look happy.
That's a good one. Somebody wants to add something?
No, I just want to add that I completely agree that our state of mind is really affecting the lab. So it's very important to make sure that we feel well and that we find the right way also, as I was mentioning, to balance the life and the work, because that's going to have a huge impact on how the others in the lab just feel. So I just...
Carlos.
Yeah, I think fearing mistakes too much is a classic big mistake, right? I mean, if you try to avoid making all mistakes, that will freeze you so much that at the end, that will stop you from progressing. I mean, obviously, we want to try to avoid making big mistakes, and we discuss with mentors and colleagues and so on to do how to do them. But ultimately, you will make mistakes, right? And very few mistakes are really like the nuclear bomb, which will just destroy everything. So, and you have time, right? I mean, you have time to also adapt a little bit, and people know that that you will be learning. So, give yourself a break. Accept the fact that you will make mistakes and learn from them, and maybe don't do 5 times the same mistake. And sometimes, you know, some PIs, that's their trademark. Some people know this person, I mean, I'm really bad, for example, in answering emails immediately, right? Or, I mean, we all have our failure modes. And I think avoiding all of these is just not possible.
Gaia.
I mean, I second all of this, what was said so far. For me, it was extremely difficult to find this positive kind of mood, or to give this positive kind of mood to the lab, to try to basically, in a way, keep the stress that is imposed from above, right? So I was in a tenure track path. And then obviously you're very stressed because you have about 5 years eventually, and then not to give that stress to the people that work in your lab. And I think this is a kind of extremely difficult. So you come and you are like full of energy, and but also full of stress, and you're trying to give this energy to the people But obviously the energy comes with the stress. And so to really find a kind of fine balance between how to pass this passion and this energy while keeping the stress, even not for you, I would say, I mean, also to not have to, that would not be healthy for you, but to kind of keep it away from the people is a very difficult thing. And whenever this balance is more toward putting the stress on the people, obviously there is not a healthy lab, which I had, so at the very beginning. At the end, I don't know how things changed, because changed. I think on one side is acceptance that they are making mistakes, on another side to learn how to cope with all those type of inputs, and then just be kind of self, or to self-aware about your mistakes, maybe.
So I would add one thing that I saw lab crashing on, which is putting the lab members to compete rather than working together. That's like a very big mistake that you don't want to do. Okay, so we have other questions?
Yes, I wanted to continue. This is about mobility in principle, but not geographic, but when you switch from industry to academic, because we are sometimes very stacked on the academic career, and I would like to see a little bit more flexibility so that we can jump a little bit between academy and the industry. And the question is here, blah, 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 blah. If someone wants to switch from academics to industry, what are the different requirements to switch successfully? Very difficult, but I know that Gaia has a little bit to do with the industry in principle.
Well, I mean, I'm cheating in a way because I never switched really from academia to industry. So I have still my position. I'm doing some startups, but I never really did the switch. So it's a bit cheating. What I can tell you from my experience is that, for instance, when I was starting thinking, or when I was approached to start those companies, is that I had to learn a completely different language. So I did not understand anything about what people were talking. It was really a mess. So I had to not even go back, but to try to catch up with all those terminology from, unique selling points to whatever, really business related thing. And so that can help just to be able to communicate with those people. But then maybe the other thing that may help, the different type of mindsetting, is to be goal-oriented, right? So in a way, when we are in academia, we have the freedom, and this is the beauty of academia, right? Of freely thinking. And in industry, I think it's a bit, which is also beautiful, because you can kind of set aims and goals, and sometimes it's really rewarding to see this progressing, and less frustrating than just think freely and not seeing concrete outputs. So maybe that's something that one has to learn, to be goal-oriented and say, set, and you have a limited time point, you have different type of deadlines, and so it's a different kind of mind setting. But again, my experience is limited with that, but those were the two things that I had really to learn.
Is Manuel having?
Yeah, so just a quick add on it. I never faced the industry world yet. I have colleagues, friends, and people I know that ended up in that type of career. So what I'm doing as an action, and I think will be a responsibility to all of us, is maybe to expand the opportunity that we have in the lab and putting in touch collaborators with all these different identities that are slightly different of the classical academic thing. So bottom line is, do not hesitate to go to your PI or to a colleague or a PI in your department, or even at the level of the university, to engage yourself in investigating what it means going to industry and whether or not your profile fits or not.
if I may just add on that, I really think that is actually very true. And this is some type of conversation that I have often with my lab members. And I think that as a PI, one has really to be open and say, you know, not have like, well, if you want to go at academia, then just, you know, you are a second type of postdoc. That should not happen. And actually what I have done already in the past is asking that quite in advance to try to understand if someone wants to move to industry, to see what are the assets, what type of techniques, for instance, they could learn in the meantime, really to be more up to date with certain type of technologies that would be interesting for the industry. So not be shy and ask for that. It's actually a very good advice.
Carlos.
Just as a quick add-on, I think also when thinking about going from industry into academia, I think, as people have said, right, I think this mobility is much easier nowadays than it used to be. Also because many opportunities in industry allow you nowadays to also publish, right? And I think that is something which is important. If you're thinking that you want to go back to academia, you might want to choose your industry position in a way that it still is research-oriented and allows you to publish. And so, and you know, I mean, industry is looking for brilliant people with scientific training, and they allow you to publish results. So that's something maybe to be mindful about if you want to keep this mobility going in and out. But we have a colleague of ours in the FENS Network of Excellence, Kasper Hogenrath, right, which now is working at Genentech, and would not be surprised if in 5 or 10 years, maybe not because of salary, but that's a different discussion, he might go back again into academia. So this is much more fluent nowadays than before, but the currency is publications to a certain extent, so that's something to be a bit mindful about.
And to finally add and close it, consider this, we are also in the learning curve. So as personally, but I think all of you share this with me, we were not born with these skills. So we learn time by time to meet the people, understand the network, understand the machinery and so on. And we accumulate this experience, and like this, we can guide more people. Now, it is those PhD students or postdocs now in our lab or in my lab are more lucky now than 10 years ago when I opened my lab, and I didn't have this knowledge and experience. So this is also part of our learning curve.
Absolutely. Okay, Laura back.
Okay, so we're running short of time, so I guess we can ask 2 more questions and then we need to close. So I find this very interesting. When starting a lab, if we are interested in implementing a new technique, is it better to hire a postdoc who knows how to do that or look for a collaborator?
I guess that was related to my hiring part, right? So in my experience, I've had a number of collaborations with people outside of my area of expertise. And in those cases, I think it's really beneficial to have a senior person in that area of research involved in the research, even if it's potentially someone with experience in their PhD who join your lab to work on that problem. It's still good to have a local colleague or even an international colleague involved in discussions to make sure that everything's moving smoothly. And it really helps out to put a little bit more of an edge to the discussions about this technology or this approach. So you can't let, you know, mediocre work slide in that sense. And it's really a wonderful opportunity also as a PI to learn about new approaches and tools, and to meet people outside of your typical network, to collaborate with senior colleagues elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Carlos.
Yeah, so that's something which, so in my lab we are very multidisciplinary, so we collaborate a lot with people, and has been wonderful, right? It's sometimes challenging because it's about working with people, but it's in general been absolutely great. When thinking about having a technology done outside of the lab or bringing it to the lab, what I ask myself is this something which we will need long term, or is this something which we need for a specific experiment or for a specific project? Because sometimes it's something new which you think, yeah, that's something, you know, which I can see being kind of central to my lab for the next 10 years. Like, for example, for us was metabolomics or microbial genetics. So I have been recruiting people and bringing that into the lab. Some other things is more something which, you know, we need for a project. And so we're going to be specifically working with someone outside of the lab, and then it's not something we're going to pursue on the long term. So that's kind of the thinking which I put into when thinking about that type of question.
Hani.
So I would say bringing someone who already knows the technique is obviously a really good option, but let's be realistic. In many places, finding postdocs who want to come to your lab to bring a new technique is very difficult, right? Maybe depending on where you work or who you are. In my experience, it's been really difficult to recruit postdocs with experience. So one thing which worked for me was, again, finding, as Pavan was saying, a collaborator, and then a PhD student which starts in my lab and spends some time maybe in the lab of this person, maybe 3 months there, learning the technique, comes back, and that creates the link in the collaboration that then can go on. And in my hands, that somehow has worked because recruiting postdocs is sometimes tricky and difficult.
Okay. So I guess that we need to conclude, and there was one question. It was more of a philosophical statement. So here it goes. Basically, it's about the title of our session that was starting your lab and as a PI and mid-career hurdles. And then the question says, as scientists who want to change things, why don't we approach this topic from the positive side rather than from the side of constantly try to rationalize the negatives? So I would like that we comment on that and we close on this. So who wants to? Manuel.
I can maybe start on it because actually this is something that I pull out in my presentation, where the PI also becomes the excitement of the mid-career PI. So I think whoever you are, your vision is right. I mean, just check out the glass when it's half full rather than when it's half empty, especially if it's a good glass of wine, as I mentioned. But still, this is difficult to do because you really need to have that mindset. And I think all of us, we share that there are hard periods, hard shifts, hard moments that are coming from different aspects. Yet, and so you cannot forget this negativity. I mean, this negative part and these challenges are real. It all depends on how you approach it. So if you approach it saying, this is what I'm working for because it actually excites me and you cannot cope with it, this is where you start changing your mindset and become a little more positive and taking things a little more realistically. Everyone fails, and failure is also part of our daily life. And all of us, from PhD, even from master, until senior PIs, face failure. This is negative, but then you can transform this into a more positive attitude. You never stop applying for a grant, for example, or publishing a paper.
Gaia.
I would add that, so I also touch upon a bit in my talk, right, that say, moving around the world yeah, it can be an issue sometimes, moving with family and so on, but has a lot of plus, really. I mean, I got to meet fantastic cultures, fantastic, diverse people. My kids got to know different language, different cultures, different way of approaching life, and they brought them back, not even back, they are still learning that. And so this is something unique. And what I always tell also to my team is, we are in a luxury position to be able to follow at all points our passion. And this is kind of unique to us, I think. I mean, not unique to us, but we really have an opportunity. So I try to make also that clear in my talk, right? While we have to find compromises, is at the end, we really have an incredible opportunity. So I see those as problems, but that you can all overcome if you have that passion.
Carlos, very quickly, you have the last word. We have like...
I just want to say, I mean, I'm loving it to be a PI, right? I mean, it's a fantastic job, and just it being sometimes challenging doesn't mean that it has to be bad. And I think visualizing sometimes what could be problems which you will be facing allows you to prepare for them, but that doesn't mean that you have to expect that they will happen, okay? Because actually you have to keep your eyes open for all the great things which will happen on the way and which you're not expecting. And if you enjoy solving challenges for other people and building up stuff, that's actually when you're really going to be thriving. This doesn't mean that this is like that for everybody. I think everybody has their own path. Everybody has the parts which they enjoy more. It's very individual, but I can tell you, I'm loving it. It's a unique opportunity, and I'm having the time of my life, especially because of the people in the lab with which I'm very, very honored to be working with. So, and the colleagues, like the FKNE, the FENS network, right? It's just people make science, and if you enjoy that, you're going to have a wonderful time.
Okay, so on this very positive note, we can conclude. And please feel free to contact us anyway with any questions. We will be happy to answer to you. And I thank all the speakers, organizers. Thank you, Pirta. Thank you, Ileana. And I also want to thank Michaela, who probably you guys do not know who she is, but she is, you know, the hardcore person in the administration that keeps the FENS network of excellence going. So,
yes, fantastic.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Very nice. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.